Are you developing IoT solutions? Get ready for tomorrow with Farnell, supporting your design journey from connecting smart sensors to the cloud to implementing AI. Find everything you need at farnell.com. Enjoy this episode with Farnell, a global distributor of electronic products and solutions.
Hello and welcome to the AV Forums podcast for Monday, the 8th of August, 2022. If you've been around and wondering where we are, we went live somewhere else. So
the multiverse.
God knows where we went live, but we went live somewhere.
It wasn't here. So
if you managed to catch that intro, well done. We're going again now. We're going to try and do it on the correct channel this time and on the correct video. Right, so coming up at 8:30 is Kaz and Movies Team. That's where we were broadcasting in the future. They're coming up at 8:30, so stay tuned for them. But first of all, we're going to do the AV Forums podcast. We're going to talk AV hardware. We've got TV coming up, TV review. We're going to talk about DIY calibration. We're going to talk about turntables, because it is 2022 and that's a thing at the minute. AV news, hi-fi news, Ian's going to tell us all about that. We've got competitions, we've got Ed's album playlist and vinyl of the podcast, and their absolute banger this week, so stay tuned for that. And we're going to wrap up with the TV shows that we have been watching. So welcome along. Once again, sorry we are late, but we're going to kick off and get straight into things. So Ed, what have you been up to since the last podcast?
Actually, I have been trying to broaden my knowledge of a health condition. During the last podcast, it didn't really feel appropriate to talk at the time. My father was actually in hospital, and he was hospitalized because he had low sodium, and he was actually in an extremely bad way. So, as you know, there's any number of medical conditions that you don't generally pay any attention to until such time as someone you know suffers from them. I've learnt lots about low sodium levels, and as I say, if you drop below a certain number, I mean, you're as a healthy adult, you're supposed to be between 130 and 140. I think it's milligrams of sodium per unit of human flesh. If it drops much below 125, things get pretty grim. My dad was admitted to hospital at 113, and he was in a very bad way indeed. So obviously been learning about that. I'm delighted to say he's back out of hospital. I wouldn't be talking about this otherwise. He is doing much better. But no, I've been learning about that. He's possibly the only person I know of that has received departing instructions when he was discharged from the NHS to eat more crisps. Which I kind of like the sound of.
I need that diagnosis in my life.
Exactly, don't we all? Unfortunately, those of us that eat enough crisps already, we're in danger of the other issues, I'm afraid. So high sodium obviously is just as bad as low sodium, to be very clear on this. But no, that's taken up a bit of my time. I have otherwise been balancing work and child minding in the school holidays. Shout out to anyone listening live or otherwise after the event who is also trying the pretense of productive work whilst one or more children are flying around the house at 3 feet demanding constant entertainment. So that's basically my existence up until this point. I think this month for AV Forums reviews, I have one of the very largest amplifiers I've ever tested and one of the very smallest DACs I've ever tested going through in the same month. It's a pleasing dichotomy of scale. So that's also something I've been working on as well.
Excellent. Jules, what have you been up to?
Well, I had an interesting few days working last week. I was at a VFX studio in Soho, calibrating their grading monitor and their C2 83-inch C2 on the wall as their client monitor. So lots of battles with metameric failure, but very interesting. They've done some pretty high-end stuff. Obi-Wan Kenobi, you'd be interested to know. So yeah, that JVC calibrations and going. Ian will be interested in this. Went to Carrow Road on Saturday for the first game of the season. A glorious 1-1 draw in the sunshine with Wigan.
That sounds amazing.
That's how good we are nowadays.
Well, no, to be fair, isn't it often the case with clubs that come down, and it doesn't matter whether they're coming down from Premier League to Championship or Championship to League One, it's the first and most important thing is getting over your post-relegation hangover, and it's not necessarily a reflection of the quality of the players. It's overcoming a mindset and getting back into things. I mean, I say this like I have some understanding of football.
You're absolutely right.
Clearer on the philosophy of these things than I am the actual play. So
lots of green shoots, Ian. Lots of green shoots on Saturday. So.
Yeah. It does look like there's still a little shortage of confidence in kind of the final third and the flair that we showed when we were doing well. But we've basically spent the last sort of 8 months just defending for our lives and not being very good at it. So it is that transition from that to actually, trying to be the better team for once. But some good players looking good, promising for the season, but it'd be nice to get a few more points on the board quite quickly.
Absolutely.
Okay, good stuff. Well, I purchased a Karcher power washer. I've been after one for years. I've never had the space to actually wash my own car, but I do now where I'm living. So went out and purchased one of those, and all the paraphernalia that goes with it, the snow foam cannon and all that kind of thing, and metal.
Well, no, but I'm pleased that you're talking about
two bins, one for wash, one for rinse, and the trays in the bottom for the grit and that kind of thing, so you're not putting stones over your paintwork and all the rest of it. So with this car, I did get it ceramic coated like I normally do, which makes cleaning it an absolute breeze. So I did the Puma first of all, which is I'm short. So getting onto the roof and being able to clean the roof was a bit of a challenge, and then I did the other half CEM-X5, which you would think would be a lot easier, but actually you got to get down on your hands and knees to get the sails because it's so low to the ground. So sore all over after that. It was a good workout, I've got to say. 2 cars in the sunshine, so you're being quick because you don't want watermarking and that kind of thing on them. So yeah, I ventured into washing my own car. And,
I just get around this, Phil, by never ever cleaning my car.
Well, you see, I always use I used to always use a professional to wash my car, do it properly, double bucket. So I've seen that approach a number of times. It is intensive to do it properly, but I think if you want to do it right, and it's a black car and it's going to show everything, I'll see how I get on with that, and it may go back to paying something else if it gets too much. But it was a good workout, if nothing else. And the pressure washer was absolutely brilliant. It makes things a lot easier. So and snow foam, who doesn't like snow foam? Spraying snow foam all over your car, it's a satisfying thing to do. Ian, you ever attempted anything like that in person?
Not strictly in person, but an awful lot in the virtual world. I mentioned it on the last podcast how I got into Power Wash Simulator, and it hasn't gone away. It hasn't gone away.
Obviously, that's a glowing endorsement of the long-term playability of the power washing simulator, or a crushing indictment of your lack of imagination. I don't know which one. But
it is so oddly addictive and compelling. It's just a pure satisfaction of seeing something go from sort of, completely dirty to absolutely pristine, and, it's all your own work. It changed my perspective on life. Not in a spiritual or fundamental sense and sorts, but now it's literally the point where I'm walking outside, I see like a fence or a wall or a road sign that's covered in dirt, and I'm just looking at it thinking, give me 30 seconds with the Prime Vista Pro and a yell, and I was like, that's spotless. It's that same thing that I have, like you guys will know from sub editing, when you're walking around and you can't stop sub editing signs and
no, that's fair.
Never been a problem.
Stuff. You see that it's the same thing, but I'm just looking around. Everything I see, it's kind of got a vertical face that could do with a clean. I'm just thinking, let me at it.
Ian, if you just buy yourself one, and then you can go around and offer your services and have the satisfaction of actually doing it.
And power washing.
I could, but then you don't get that satisfying ting when you've perfectly cleaned something in the game, or the little montage at the end that shows you like a kind of a stop motion 30-second animation of your cleaning process from dirty to spotless, and it's just like, I did that, and it's a beautiful thing. So
you pressed some buttons and you watched it happen.
Well, it's still my work. A job well done, and it's free on Game Pass, so anybody that's even just, if you've seen any of those YouTube videos of guys painting walls and they're doing it in like 30 seconds, or, they've got the spray gun out and they're doing cabinets, and you thought, oh, that's oddly satisfying. Like the guy who paints the road markings in that kind of beautiful sweat. Yeah. It's kind of that kind of satisfaction. And yeah, it's currently free to play on Game Pass. So if you're looking for some kind of peace of mind, I'd recommend it to anyone.
Okay, it's funny you say that because I did do the rear patio, which was really satisfying because it's got one of those twisty high pressure things that came with it, and it lifted the dirt and the weeds and all sorts. It was excellent. It's superb. So,
well, I suppose when the house pipe bands come in soon, you'll be
I'm up north. We're fine. We're not going to run out of water up here.
Well, if you need to get your fix somewhere, Power Wash Simulator is the place to go.
Yes, right, if you are in the Thames Valley area, just limit your power washing to the virtual world for the good of us all.
Well, there you go. That's a bit of advice. That's up to the minute advice there from Ian. Go and power wash virtually. Right. I think it's time that we need to crack on. So let's get on with the show.
If you'd like to support the AV Forums podcast on a regular basis, then why not become a patron? Head over to patreon.com/AV Forums to sign up. You can also make a one-off donation through the Super Chat or via streamlabs.com/AV Forums. All donations help us to improve the website and the podcasts. Thank you to all our supporters.
We do have a new patron. Somebody's got the cursor up against the word and I can't read it at the moment.
It's Taran, isn't it?
Taran. Thank you very much. Your support is appreciated. I'm looking at a shared document and somebody's got their cursor up against that and it was very hard to see. But again, thank you very much for your support. Welcome as a patron. And if you're out there and you want to win something, we've got some current competitions and I'm going to go to Jules for this one. So Jules, current competitions, what can people win?
Well, you can win £300 gift cards for pure.com, £300 gift cards for teicaudio.com, and £1,000 worth of prizes with MPB. And you can win a 2 terabyte Homax or a 4K Freeview Play recorder. That's a bit of a mouthful. And Homax Wi-Fi Smart Plug Bundle. So head over to avforums.com/competition to enter. All competitions are open to eligible AV Forums members resident in the UK.
Unfortunately, Kaz doesn't see the winners of the hardware competition, so he doesn't fill in the previous competition winners. So there are previous competition winners.
But one day, don't know who they are.
We might actually tell you who they are, and it'll be a long list because there's been a few now, but we'll try and find out, and we will mention our winners on the competitions in future. Thanks very much for that, Jules. Right, let's move on to AV News. Just before we do that, if you are watching live, obviously the question and answer session is coming soon. So the chat window is open to the right-hand side of the video if you're watching on YouTube live at the moment. Get your questions in there if it's about the LG C2 or if it's about turntables or what we're going to discuss in the AV and hi-fi news. Get your questions in there. We'll answer them as soon as they pop up, and we have a second to do that. But let's go to AV News. Ian, what's happening in the world of AV at the moment?
Well, as has been happening, it's still relatively quiet in terms of the summer months, but there's been quite a bit of movement in the streaming sector of late. Just to point to a couple of other stories that are currently on the site, Amazon Prime raising their prices in the UK, which we kind of expected, as an update for Freeview Play, which just adds a few navigation features. But perhaps the biggest news is Warner Brothers Discovery, effectively converting their plans to combine Discovery Plus and HBO Max into a single streaming service from sometime next year. It's not a huge surprise because the idea was touted when Discovery first merged with Warner Media earlier in the year. But it was all but confirmed in a recent earnings call, along with their Q2 financial reports, which showed further losses. So clearly they're looking at ways to kind of streamline the service, and merging Discovery Plus and HBO Max seems like a fairly common sense solution. And quite possibly there could be other Warner Brothers brands that get brought into the mix. Plans to start rolling out in America next year, unlikely to be in Europe until around 2024, but we don't get HBO Max at the moment anyway, so in the UK, not a great loss, but it'll be interesting to see, what kind of new streaming service that turns into and just what it can deliver.
Well, I mean, Discovery Plus, HBO, it's all tied in with Sky over here at the moment. Obviously, we get Discovery Plus through that platform as well. So, it'll be interesting to see how that moves on. There has been some fallout in terms of films being cancelled. I think there was 2 films canned. One of them was it Batgirl?
Batgirl, yeah.
Yeah. So I didn't even know that was in production, but assumedly that has been dropped.
They spent quite a bit of money on it already.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a massive tax write-down on that one. But yeah, there's been some decisions on the back of that news. So it's going to be, I'm going to say that word again, interesting to see how things pan out in the weeks ahead.
I personally believe that this is a Morbius thing. They've announced they're going to cancel it. You'll never get to see it. They're hoping to generate some internet backlash, and they will grudgingly release it in one form or another.
Right.
And there will be such a sort of hype over the fact that they've sort of relented, that it will mask the fact that it's dreadful and unrelentingly dreadful. I have a sneaking suspicion that that's actually what the eventual long play for this particular saga will be. So, but we'll see.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not going to see it even if it does come out, so it's irrelevant.
Yeah. We all have our opinions on stuff like that, and it's one of those. We're going to see this more and more as time goes on, and the streaming services, and there are going to be buyouts and mergers and all sorts. So that's not the first, and it's not going to be the last either. So, Ian, what else is going on in the world of AV and hi-fi news?
Well, a couple of hi-fi stories. Not at all related to the upcoming debate about turntables under £500, because there's a couple that are quite substantially over £500 that have been announced. First of which would be the Pro-Ject Audio have unveiled the X2 B, which is essentially much the same as the existing X2, but it comes with the addition of a fully balanced XLR output, which integrates with the company's new True Balance Connection family of balanced products. That one comes with the £1,399 price tag, so again slightly over £500. Substantially over £500 would be the ClearAudio Reference Jubilee turntable, which it's kind of a homage to one of its original designs from the 1980s. It certainly looks the part, but it comes with a price tag of £17,500, which probably will put it slightly above the price range of your everyday vinyl enthusiast, but it does look cool. So there's that.
Yeah,
it's worth pointing out the Pro-Ject. I mean, the ClearAudio is a different case. The Pro-Ject is an interesting one. Balanced hi-fi has sort of become more and more popular over the last couple of years. If you are going to balance anything, the turntable is your natural candidate. Cartridges, moving coil cartridges in particular, are naturally balanced. They have separate earths, separate grounds for both channels, and so on and so forth. So if you have that, a fully balanced phono stage, and you can go into the XLR input of a balanced amplifier, it is a hell of a lot quieter. I've just finished testing the bigger Pro-Ject balanced turntable, the X8, for another publication. And yeah, if you're looking to buy a turntable and a phono stage at the same time, and you've got the matching hardware in the rest of your system, don't underestimate one. It isn't a gimmick. If you are going to balance any of your sources, this is probably the one that you want to balance. So yeah, that's quite an interesting one. And ClearAudio is just doing a variation on what lots of other manufacturers have already seen are doing, which is shamelessly mining its past, reminding you of a time when things weren't as awful. And I hope that they have lots of success with it.
There's going to be a lot of marketing going that way. Right, so let's stick with turntables. Thanks for the news, Ian. And of course, if you want any more information on those stories, they are on the website now. Just go to news and you can read all about them. But let's stick with turntables. Turntables are a thing in 2022. So before we talk about budget turntables, and we're talking about under £500 here, Ed, and your recommendations in terms of what people should be looking at for that kind of money and what kind of performance you're going to get. Is it worth someone who has no vinyl collection at the moment? Is it worth somebody getting into vinyl now, or is this hobby for somebody that's already invested in some way? Maybe they've got stuff in the loft or whatever.
Do you know what? It's one of those ones. If you do feel that you'll have the disposable income to buy a meaningful quantity of records, and that's not a small undertaking. I mean, you can still buy cheap records, but they're usually awful now. So the costs involved are significant. Then yes, it is. I mean, it's still a tremendously entertaining and engaging way of listening to music. But if you have no records right now, and you're at the moment you don't budget anything for physical media purchases, no, don't go anywhere near it. Leave it well alone. It's simply going to be a colossal expenditure, and you'll never really reap the benefits because you'll have you don't have much media to enjoy on it. I mean,
I definitely see this as the Laserdisc of today. In those terms, you know, you're spending an awful lot on the software. You're spending an awful lot on the vinyl. It's what is it, £25 the average price?
Oh God, yeah. New releases hover between 19 and 25 these days. And you know, for example, this week's final of the month is a lot more than that, although it is bigger. So yes, if we're talking about £500 turntables, that's the equivalent price. If you spent £500 on a turntable and then you spent £500 again on albums, you're still only looking at about 25, 30 albums. Which is, when you then compare it to the fact that you have virtually the entire world's recorded music available to you on most streaming services, you've got to really want to do this.
Yeah.
So don't be swayed by the allure of it unless you really want, you either have access to a number of records already, or you know that you're going to be able to. I mean, I don't regard myself as buying too many records at the moment, but I'm still spending an easy £80 to £100 a month on the damn things, and I don't consider myself as buying very many of them at the moment. So make of that what you will. I mean, I dare say that's me confessing to a significant first world problem there, but nevertheless, that's the long and the short of it. And this also then feeds into your decisions that you make if you are going to buy a turntable. And Phil actually messaged me a couple of days ago, did I want to talk about under £1,000 or under £500? And I said it has to be £500. If you can spend £1,000 on a turntable, some of the stuff I'm going to talk about doesn't apply, because you don't have to make the either or decision I'm about to talk about. Turntables under £500 break down into two categories, really, because there's very, very capable turntables which will save you a bit of money, but they don't have much stretch. It always used to be with, even comparatively affordable turntables, inflation notwithstanding, that you could spend the money and then you could upgrade that turntable, like, my grandmother's axe or the ship of Theseus or however you want. So, what ended up had very little in common with the device you'd bought, but it was still technically the same turntable. That's almost impossible now under £500. The last two examples of this that really exist in budget, you've got the Pro-Ject debut carbon. It's the carbon DC, which we've done a review of on the site. We've also covered all the upgrades for it because it is so upgradable. That's a penny under £500. So your budget will be maxed, but over time, from Pro-Ject, without having to do any bodging, any warranty invalidation, any of that, you can buy a whole selection of parts that would take you well past £1,000, continuously getting better all the time. There's also the Audio-Technica LP5X, which is a bit less formulaic in how you update it, because it responds more to third-party components than it does anything that Audio-Technica makes, other than updating the stylus. And those two turntables are ones, if you know that you're going to get stuck into this and that it's something that you're going to commit to, it gives you the scope to stretch those turntables without having to sell them and buy again. Otherwise, it's interesting, in the thread, in the comments, Nigel Henry, he has a Riga Planer 2, which is an absolutely joyous sounding record player. And it's easy to set up. It is attractive. It is elegant. Nigel's has experimented with changing cartridges and changing phono stages, which you can do on most turntables. The scope for how far you can push a Planer 2 is smaller than those two turntables I've talked about. Riga has economized by making it more of a fixed pattern item. Now, these products sound excellent, but it means that if you do want to push your vinyl habit in future, you're going to have to look at selling it and buying another turntable. I mean, obviously, in the context of how we update our AV equipment and other things, selling it and buying another one is perfectly normal. And unlike AV equipment, it does usually have resale value. But the whole idea of vinyl used to be that you could actually, you'd buy something and it would just grow and stretch. I mean, the gyro deck that lived with me has had, in the time that I've owned it, has had 6 different arms on it. And it had more even before I bought it. Now that leads on to the other thing. At £500, there are plenty of used turntables, and you can make a useful saving. You can end up buying something which costs substantially more, and you get that sort of, and because let's face it, the technology is obsolete. This isn't the same as buying a 3-year-old AV receiver. You're not missing out on the latest bells and whistles if you buy something which is 20, 25 years old. The only thing is, if you do buy something which is 20 or 25 years old, it goes without saying it's lived 2 decades. Go into buying anything used with your eyes open, but turntables and speakers especially, they're not immortal. They respond very badly to being mistreated. And if something looks too good to be true, I absolutely 100% assure you that it is too good to be true. So £500 used will go further, but don't go in blind. I mean, turntables do crop up in our own classifieds, and there's obviously the greater degree of protection from how we operate the classifieds here, but there's not that many of them. You are normally going to have to throw yourself onto the tender mercies of eBay or similar to find a significant choice of used turntables. So all of those are options, but the question that Phil asked right at the beginning is the best one. You have to be absolutely sure that you really want to do this. I mean, it's just off screen here for people watching. I have a 12-hole Kallax, which has records A to O in it, and that's 20 years of collecting. And then there's another 8-unit Kallax, which has got P to Z, and the replacement cost of it is astronomical. There's, as Phil says, there's elements of Laserdisc. There's also elements of the housing market. At the moment, people being suckered in to buy new turntables are fundamentally maintaining an industry of lots of shiny new lovely records being pressed for people like me. And people coming into it now aren't seeing anything of the same benefits, which bringing out my inner social justice there is something that you need to take into account. But if you do have questions, you can obviously stick them into the comment section here or the comment section in the podcast thread after it arrives on the forums. But honestly, you have to, do you think you have to sit down and think, am I willing to spend £500 on a record player and then, to have a meaningful number of new releases somewhere between, 2 new releases is 50 quid a month, 4 is 100. You start working on that principle and decide if it is really the exercise for you, especially if you're also still buying 4K media, which is similar sort of cost these days, as I understand it.
Yeah, it is indeed. Nigel Henry makes a good point in the comments as well. He says you actually listen to the full album and you don't skip. And of course, you got the beauty of physical media. And I guess that's something I hadn't really considered. I have access, like lots of people do, to streaming audio. I very, very rarely sit and listen to the whole thing all the way through. I'm really bad for skipping and so on. But I guess, Ed, it comes to that point where you've got to get up off your backside to go and put a record on. Then you have to walk back, sit down, listen to it. You're not going to
and also, if you are someone that enjoys a drink of an evening, you have to understand that there comes a time in the evening where you should switch to digital, because if you don't, you will cause something significant grief. If you're lucky, you'll just cause the record grief. If you're not lucky, you'll cause your cartridge grief. And that can get very expensive very quickly. But no, I completely agree with Nigel. Last night, I listened back to back. It was a varied evening. I listened to the Notorious B.I.G.'s Ready to Die. And then I listened to one of the previous albums of the week from a while back, the live Brand New Heavies Shibuya 357 on vinyl, start to finish, no skipping, no nothing, and it was glorious. So yeah, I mean, if you can, if it appeals to you, please don't let me put you off. You just need to go in with your eyes open about just how much this is going to end up costing you.
It's something I do miss. It's something I used to do as a stress release a number of years ago. I would go and lock myself in the cinema room and listen to an album. Dim the lights and then just sit with a drink and just listen to the whole thing. And so that's something that I don't do anymore. And I certainly miss that aspect. So again, it's something that appeals to me. And before we change subject, let's quickly go around the team. Jules, vinyl, you still collecting? Or is
no, I got rid of mine in the 80s.
Yeah.
When CD came out, that was it. Get rid of it. And,
it's the future.
Yeah, well, my daughter's just bought. Well, she bought last year. She bought a cheap turntable. One of the speakers is already blown from Amazon, She's got about four LPs. I'm just wondering, Ed, what's the second-hand prices like for vinyl now? Because
no, certain things. Yeah. I'm going to discuss this with the vinyl of the week. There are albums here, Jules, that I've paid. Well, the best example, tragically, it's an album I no longer own because I sold it as a batch of albums when I was made redundant in 2009. I bought Echo Park by Feeder new in 2001, and I paid £18 for it. I sold it to an incredibly excited man for £255 in 2009. It's now worth well over £400. Wow. And the other one, Athlete. Do you remember Athlete? They had an album called Tourist. I bought that for £17 and I sold it to an excited man in Germany for 180, even though it's dreadful. Huh. So yeah, it can go bananas, Jules. I mean, if you've got certain things in limited presses, the most sensible thing you do is never play it. Just look happily at it.
Well, my dad's 82. He's got a huge record collection still. I don't think it ever gets played, but he had an original Buddy Holly on the album cover had without the glasses, which apparently is quite rare.
Oh no, stuff like that. Oh yeah. God, this is the great thing. If you cash out, generally speaking, it's always worth more than zero, and you actually have to work quite hard to buy modern vinyl releases, which depreciate significantly because there's no such thing as a repress. Really, everything just gets done as a first pressing. And when it's sold. There's no more of them. I mean, there's always exceptions to that. There's 400 different versions of Fleetwood Mac Rumours and so on and so forth. And Adele's album was pressed in vast quantities. But no, it can be, unlike so much of this hobby, it can at least be either revenue neutral or actually make you a profit, but only if you cash out.
Yeah, which
as a hoarder I can't do.
Yeah, well, I used to professionally use vinyl back in the day, and obviously I had boxes and boxes and boxes of 7-inch and 12-inch and albums, and it all went, all of it went. End of the 90s, it all went, and I miss it. I really do miss it because I had some absolute cracking albums and stuff in those boxes that they all went as a job lot along with turntables and all sorts, and I can't find a turntable now that I want because they were all used for professional work and they're all worn smooth and banged to bits. So, Ian, vinyl, yes or no?
No. All my disposable income's going on video games for far too long, so I never really.
Saving up for a power washer.
Yeah, saving up for a power washer. Right. So let's move things on. Let's go to visual side of things. We're going to talk about TV now. It's a TV review that is up on the site at the moment. If you want to get stuck into that review, then please do go and read it. It is the 42-inch LG C2. Now, we've already reviewed the 65-inch C2. It's sitting right next to me here. We went out and purchased that right at the beginning of the year. We're going to use this as a reference point next to the G2, which I've also got. And we've got the S95B from Samsung, which is directly behind me. This is a little bit different. This is a 42-inch. It's the first time this screen size has been released by, LG Display developed it. LG Electronics sell the C2. One thing I want to get over straight away, and I am guilty of this in the reviews by trying to simplify the whole OLED Evo side of things. I've gotten into the habit of saying Evo panel. There's no such thing as an Evo panel, so I just want to get that out there straight away. Evo is a mixture of the panel being used, the compounds within the panel, and also the video processing. All of that combined in different ways is what LG define in their marketing term as Evo. So I have seen comments on the thread. I'll put my hands up. I was guilty of that. I have removed the con from the list because it was describing it wrong. Because LG make it so difficult to keep up with what's called what. The latest one is OLED EX, which is actually an LG display marketing name for the panels that then become obviously an LG Evo once it's added to the correct processing and so on. So I wanted to get, it's not easy to follow. So yeah, there's no such thing as an Evo panel. So just be aware of that. Evo is a mixture of the different technologies. But anyway, let's get onto the 42-inch. It's a new screen size. it takes a while for these screen sizes to come along. The main problem here is obviously the pixel pitch, and getting 4K onto a panel this size is not easy. It's taken them a while to manage to do that. We had the 48-inch 3 years ago now, and the 42 is the next step. I think 42 is the smallest we're going to see. It's definitely from LG Display as things are at this moment in time, but 42 is a good screen size for a lot of people. And I've actually given it a best buy and said that this is the best small screen TV you can currently buy. I stand by that because you're getting the ultimate in black levels. You're getting the most up-to-date picture processor on this. You don't get the brightness booster that's on the 55 inch and above. So let me just quickly explain that. 55 inches and above, they have slightly different panels. Again, let's not confuse things with Evo and whatever. They're just slightly different panels. The panels that are in the 42 and 48 are slightly older generation than the 55 and above. As things go on this year, later in the year, obviously they'll all move over into the latest generation of panel. Again, do not confuse that with Evo. Evo is the processing and the panel and the compounds that are used within those different panels. So it can be a combination of different parts, but they are tuned a certain way, and the processing makes the image quality look the same across the range. But there are a few differences. The brightness booster is the main one, so 55 and above gets his brightness booster, so it can reach a lot brighter. You're talking nearly 800 nits in the filmmaker mode on the C2 55 and above. It's slightly lower when we get down to these smaller screen sizes. Obviously, the advantages of the smaller screen sizes, it can go anywhere. It can be used as a monitor, and I think this is a big plus point. A lot of people out there were saying, well, actually, I don't want to use an OLED. I'm going to get image retention and burn-in. You will if you overuse it and you have it too bright and you have a static image on the screen for a long time and you disable the mitigation that's built into the TVs. If you sidestep all of that, then the likelihood is you will get image retention, you will get burn-in. For you guys out there, general users, those people who take pride in their equipment and want to get the best out of it and get the best use out of it, it's not an issue for you gaming on one of these TVs or using it as a monitor. I used it for color grading some videos that I'd edited because I felt it was of good enough quality to do that. I've been experimenting with HDR video, and again, it was perfect for that. The thing I did try last year was a 48-inch as a monitor sitting in front of me. I did try that, and the problem was I was sat too close to it, and you can start to see the pixels and all the rest of it, and a little bit eye strain, and text doesn't quite look right and so on. Whereas I found the 42 at the same distance that I was sitting from the 40, a different experience and a lot more comfortable to sit with. You do need to sit a little bit further back if you're going to use it as a monitor, but it makes a great monitor. And again, you've got pixel level control here. You've got ultimate blacks. You've got really bright whites. You've got that pixel makeup in here in terms of the number of pixels in such a small area. It makes things look ultra sharp. Even from a normal viewing distance, it looks fantastic. So yeah, if you're asking me what's the best small screen TV, it's going to be OLED. It's going to be this OLED. It is absolutely fantastic. It is the best in terms of video processing that LG has done. Just above black is excellent. Motion is improved over the C1 and the C10. So yeah, E4 HDMI 2.1, 48 gigabits per second. WebOS 22 is really, really good. You got Dolby Atmos, you got Dolby Vision, you got HDR10, HLG, and Dolby Vision IQ. It's a cracking TV. I couldn't find that many faults with it. In terms of general all-round TV for the living room, it's superb and so on. So before we move on, I'm just going to quickly go through some of the questions because I can see that the questions have been coming in. And again, the review is on the website, so go read that. And if you've got any further questions, you can obviously ask the questions in the thread attached to the review or in the podcast. but 42-inch, does it come with a pedestal or feet? It's 2 feet at either end of the panel on this TV. It's nice in that it lifts the panel enough to get a soundbar, or if you're using it as a monitor, you can slide your keyboard and so on under there out of the way if you're using it as a desktop. I'm going to come back to the question that Stevie DR asked about Jules and the 83-inch. We'll come into that in a second. Very quickly, 42-inch OLED. I read on other forums. I've explained Evo stuff, so JG Knots, thank you very much for that question. I have answered that one in my roundup. Very quickly, back to turntables. We're back to, I want to make sure I get everybody's questions here. No need to upgrade. If you want to upgrade your C1, get it calibrated. That's good advice, please. Yeah, you could do that. You're going to miss very little, actually, in terms of features and so on. The better processing, the better upscaling, the better motion, slightly better on the C2, but is it worth the extra? Only you can decide that, whether you pay for a calibration, do your calibration yourself, or upgrade. A lot of people using the C2 as a monitor. Yeah, great. Paul S. It makes a fantastic monitor. I have done that while it was here. Used it with my MacBook for editing and so on. I think I've covered most of those questions. If I haven't, if you've got questions, you're listening a little bit further on in the week after this has gone out live and you want to ask questions, do that in the podcast thread underneath this podcast. I will get round to answering them. I am trying to make myself available when these reviews go live and also when the podcasts go live. If you've got questions, we will get round to answering them. Right, so there was a question for Jules here connected to the C2. Just need to find it again. So bear with me. So Stevie DR asked, Jules mentioned the 83-inch LG. It was the C2, wasn't it?
C2, yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit more in detail? You want to know what uniformity, etc., is like on the much larger panel size. And of course, that's something that I don't look at here in this room. I have to go outside of here and go inside to see these.
Could you get one through your door, Phil?
Nope, I couldn't. 77 just won't fit because the door is on the staircase. I'm actually restricted. 65 is as big as I can get into this current premises. But anyway, uniformity, that kind of thing. Yeah. Is there much difference the larger you go?
Well, this is the only 83-inch I've so far seen, and it was actually very, very good. No problems at all with that. If that one's anything to go by, no worries. It was really, really good on its uniformity.
And again, your filmmaker mode and so on. You impressed with that?
Yeah, absolutely. It was all pretty. Pretty accurate. In filmmaker mode, excellent. It doesn't get you complete accuracy, but it gets you really close. Of course, what I was doing was perceptually matching it to an ASO LCD monitor, which was really tough because that looked very, quite different, even though they'd been calibrated to the same white point. That was the challenge in that studio. But yeah, 83-inch, superb. It's the large screen, isn't it? It's what people pay to get for IMAX for, isn't it? The bigger the screen, the more immersive the whole thing is, and it's a superb picture. Really, really good.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see the conversation we've had many years on this podcast. Do you go large screen TV? Do you go projector? It is getting closer and closer now in terms of image size and so on. It's one of these things we're going to have to consider soon. Am I right in thinking, Jules, that you actually looked at the Sony Laser, the 7000 recently?
Yeah. I calibrated that a few weeks back. I've got another one coming up next week as well.
Okay, well, I had one just turn up for review, so I sorting the cinema room out, going to get that up and running. So we will talk about that in a future podcast. So if you're interested in the latest gen of projectors and how they calibrate and setting them up and all that kind of thing, we're going to get round to that. So stay tuned for that. So just wrapping up on the TV side of things, we're talking about calibration and so on. I guess the best way to explain this one is we talk about filmmaker mode and how accurate things are out of the box. That should not be confused with calibration. And I want to make this really quite clear. Filmmaker mode out of the box, it gets your TV as close as possible to the industry standards for how things should be seen. It does not take into account your room. It does not take into account your video chain. And when I say video chain, that's your PVR, that's your disc player, that's any other source that's going into the TV. The TV doesn't know any of that, and how that is set up and so on. So filmmaker mode is absolutely brilliant, but it's not a catch-all in those terms. You have to be aware that there are going to be some variances and so on. So this is where calibration comes in. We've discussed it over quite a number of weeks now, the differences between different types of calibration, what you need to do and so on. So Jules, I guess at the end of the day, money might be tight, and people out there can't quite stretch to a professional calibrator, but they're an enthusiast. They want to try it themselves. And we all started off doing exactly that.
Yeah.
We got software, we got a set of meters, and we learnt the craft that way. And then we went and got formally trained and qualified and so on the back of that initial first interest in the subject. So for people starting out nowadays, they are very lucky because it's not a minefield like it was back in the day. So maybe just explain what people should be considering if they want to get into the hobby and learn it themselves in terms of calibration and what to look for.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Back in the day, that's how I got started as well. A cheap spider probe from eBay, and having said that, we only had SDR to worry about back in those days, didn't we, Phil? So now you've got Dolby Vision. You want to calibrate your game modes. You want to calibrate HDR10, HDR10 Plus, HLG, everything. We've got lots of different things to consider, and usually on a normal professional one, I'm calibrating sometimes up to 7 picture modes on one television if it's an LG. But if you're going to go and do it as a hobby, it's great fun as well. Bit of a learning curve, but if you're into it, it's going to pay you back in a lot of fun and enjoyment. Maybe irritation too at times when things aren't working right. But I guess there is some free software out there. HCFR is a free software that's been around for a while. You can download that and get yourself a fairly cheap monitor, something like an X-Rite i1 Pro, the OEM version, I believe. You have to be careful which version you get because some of them are locked into different pieces of software. So I know Portrait Displays sells the OEM version. They also sell a souped up version called the C6, which comes with all sorts of different profiles for different displays. And this is probably the most important thing to think about when you're doing this. If you're buying a colorimeter, there is a certain degree of inaccuracy built into a colorimeter because it's an RGB tri-stimulus one, as opposed to a spectrophotometer like an i1 Pro 2 or Pro 3, which are more accurate, but they're also a hell of a lot more expensive. So if you're starting out, I guess you're going to go for the colorimeter and have a profile from there. Usually all these things come bundled with a profile. So when you're using your colorimeter, you'll look in the software and it will probably have a profile there for an LCD monitor or for an OLED, and you'll select that and it will correct or attempt to correct the readings from the colorimeter with regard to the display you're actually using at that point. The ideal, however, is that you should really have a profile made on the display you're actually using. So that's where you'd have a spectro to profile against to improve the accuracy of your meter. But you can start with that and see how you get on. Calman or Portrait Displays, who produce Calman, actually also have a level of software called Calman Home, and they produce it for specific manufacturers of televisions like LG, Panasonic, Samsung, and Sony. The other thing you'll want to do is you'll need a pattern generator to create the reference patterns that your meter is going to read to be able to send that back to the software. Now, if you've got an LG and a Panasonic TV, you're in luck because the pattern generator is actually in the display itself. So when you link it up to Calman, you'll actually be able to use the patterns generated by the TV. That's not the case with Samsung and Sony, so you'd need an additional pattern generator, and then that can cost you quite a bit more money as a result. So yeah, I mean, there is also Light Illusion produce color space. I think they do a really cheap one called Zero, but that only allows you for manual calibration, and then the next one up is a few £100. If you're looking at the overall cost, it's probably a professional calibration is still cheaper than buying the software and the meter together, especially if you've got to add a signal generator for a Samsung or a Sony display. But then you'd have the equipment and you'd be able to repeat it in the future. So yeah, it's a bit of swings and roundabouts. But it's well worth doing it. We got into it. It's great fun. It's a real learning curve, and you'll really enjoy it.
Yeah, and it's the learning side. If you enjoy that side of things, you will enjoy this, because you're going to learn a lot. And one of the things is that we've just been talking about meters and software and all the rest of it, and this is the type of game where your eye also plays, and your experience plays a big part of things, because sometimes your meter and your software can say one thing, and you're looking at a display and it's telling you something completely different. So there's lots of things to learn, and it's not just about relying on a piece of software or relying on a meter. You really do need to master that learning curve, but it's great fun. And if you're like myself or Jules and you enjoy that type of thing, you're really going to enjoy calibrating. It's a challenge. But when something's wrong, you know it's wrong. And a lot of the fun sometimes is actually backtracking and saying, well, hang on a minute, why am I getting the results that I'm getting here? And thankfully, it's rare these days. But when we were starting out, Jules, and certainly when I started out reviewing and we were talking to manufacturers about we need this control and that control, that really was the Wild West at times. You get TVs that had a so-called color management system on board, but the system on chip had no memory or no processing power for that, so it was absolutely useless. There are some TVs still on the market now where you go into the CMS and you calibrate it with the software, and it reports back that it's doing things correctly. But you can see by just looking at the image that there's something seriously wrong going on with that. So if you like that kind of thing, if you like problem solving, troubleshooting, finding out what a display is capable of doing and what the limitations are on these displays. And once you start calibrating, you soon realize there's no such thing as a perfect TV. We bang on about this all the time. That's where you start to learn all about the limitations and so on.
Yeah, and there's panel to panel variation, which I see on a daily basis. You can get a bunch of C1, C2s, whatever TV it is, and they're not all the same. There'll be some variation in their output, whether it's their peak output in HDR or their color accuracy. There is some slight deviations there.
Yeah. I've just seen an interesting comment come up at 666 knots again. Is it possible to do any damage if you don't know what you're doing, or is it non-destructive settings? If you stay within the menu systems of the TV, you are not going to do any permanent damage. There's always the reset button if things start to go awry and so on. When you start buying remote controls that get you into service menus and so on, that's where you really need to know what you're doing. Or you've got enough money to go and buy that TV again if it goes bang, because there are things that you can do in a service menu if you don't know what you're doing. And I get daunted going into service menus, and I've been doing this nearly 20 years now. You can make some adjustments in there that can do some serious damage. You can unlock certain features that are on TVs. You can also bypass OLED mitigation stuff that's in there. So, you can do that. Would I recommend that you do it? Well, it's your TV. If you can afford to replace it, then go ahead, because it ain't going to get covered in the warranty in most cases.
In the same way that you can, if you have a car with a turbocharger, you can go for not a lot of money. You can turn the boost up to lots.
Yeah, you can stage
and it
one,
can be
stage two.
momentarily hilarious until all of the bits that were designed to run with a turbocharger at the level it was actually supplied at decide to call it a day.
Yeah, exactly.
And your engine turns into an elaborate art installation. It's sort of similar.
So, there are fantastic things you can do, whether you're tuning a car, whether you're going into a TV service menu. If you know what you're doing and you apply the tweaks and you use a bit of common sense behind it, you can switch things off. You can get around some of the mitigation and get a little bit extra brightness out the panels and so on. Just be aware that there are consequences to that. And, if it does go bang and you send it back to the manufacturer and their technician happens to run a log, they can see when you've been in the service menu and what you've been doing. So just be aware of that. We're not saying don't do it. It's your product. You can, if you've got the confidence to do it and you want to do that, then nobody's stopping you. But just be aware of the consequences if that is what you want to do. And there's plenty of videos out there that show you how to do all this kind of thing. Just at the end of the day, be aware you could absolutely tank the TV and you got to buy a new one on the back of that. Right. So that's DIY calibration. We've covered it as much as we can for this evening, but if you have any further questions, then do put them underneath this podcast at AV Forums in the forum, or you can do it on this video in the description if you're watching on YouTube, and we will be more than happy to answer those questions. And again, just to reiterate, if it's in the menu system and you're messing about with it, don't worry. There is a reset button. If you're going into the service menu and you don't know what you're doing, just be prepared to buy a new TV. You can do some pretty disastrous things in there. Right, I think we've covered just about enough of that. Like I say, any further questions, get them in the comments section. So to wrap up tonight, before we go into TV shows that we've been watching, Ed's going to give us his album, vinyl and playlist.
Yeah, album and vinyl are one and the same again this week. It's summer in the same way that there's not much news for Ian. Album releases do slow down. I mean, obviously there is a new Beyonce album and it is good. But I mean, some of the feedback after I had the temerity to suggest Taylor Swift, I mean, you go and listen to Beyonce album and enjoy it on your own merit. But the actual choice this week is Orbital. 30-something is so called because Orbital's 30th anniversary was actually in 2019, but certain events got in the way of them celebrating it correctly. So this was released last Friday, not this Friday gone, the Friday before. 30-something is 2 new tracks and a host of reworks, refits, and rejiggles of some of their existing numbers. It is available on all major streaming services, as you might reasonably expect. It's available on CD, but the reason it is the vinyl release of the month is that you get, I'll hold it up, you get this absolutely glorious 4 LP box set, and it's huge and it's beautifully pressed. It's just a glorious tactile thing. It is a glorious tactile thing, which I need to be perfectly honest, the best part of £70. So you need, once again, I mean, as I say, that's a significant chunk of cash. But I love Orbital. I've loved them since the first stuff. They're quieter these days. They don't produce as much material, but I just thoroughly enjoyed this. I know Phil's been listening to it as well. And it's tremendously entertaining. I would say if you are a vinyl user and you do like Orbital, this box set won't exist in unlimited quantity. So it won't be. So if you want it for £70 rather than buying it off someone gouging you for £150 or more by Christmas, my suggestion is that you get on this one reasonably quickly, because Orbital vinyl releases have never been terribly numerous. So that is the album and vinyl.
It's been on high rotation here. I mean, they're Orbital fans, so but yeah, the reworkings, the remixes, and so on, absolutely brilliant. Well,
Orbital's rotating, is it?
What's that? Sorry,
Orbital is rotating.
Well, it's
I'm glad you got that joke, Jules.
They're named originally.
I didn't get it.
They're named originally for M25 Orbital.
All right.
Is as I understand it. But no, that's, as I say, that's the album vinyl. Do have a listen, even if you don't end up buying it on an enormous vinyl box set.
And Grumpy, I agree with you. Chime is just one of them tracks, basically.
I have to say it's the rework. Firstly, one of the new tracks, Smiley, is glorious. Really nice use of samples and just so wonderfully nostalgic. And the reworking of Satan. I do like Satan as a track, always have done. That's particularly entertaining. Playlist sort of feeds into this. Qobuz, and I know I keep linking to Qobuz playlist. There's 2 reasons for this. The first is that almost all the other streaming services have got rid of all of their curating staff. So they just aren't turning out interesting playlists. Qobuz still is, and the other one is it's the service I use more than anyone else. The others, 100 cult electronic albums, 10 hours, 100 tracks, 100 essential albums. If you are an electronics fan, you will. I was trying to work it out. I'm at about 78 of the 100. But have a listen through. There was one or two things that I was unfamiliar with, and I will be investigating further. It's absolutely joyous. If you don't like electronic music this week, tough, I'm afraid. Go and listen to Beyonce. It's very good. And I'll try and pick something with analog undertones for the next podcast.
If we don't have Qobuz, Ed, what is there a way that we can?
Yes, although no one seems to ask for it. If you need me to, I can drop the link for the podcast.
Yeah, please do.
The playlist into the thing, and then you can use a website called Soundies, where so long as you have a user account with a live streaming service, it will port that playlist into the streaming service of your choice. It supports Spotify, Deezer, Tidal. I believe it does Napster and Amazon as well these days. So you should be covered regardless of what you listen to. Sound is to it. So it's sound and then 2 I's and a Z, obviously. And that will help you do that. And if you need the link, I'll stick it in. It goes live later on this evening. I've got to get ready to take someone to the airport at horrendous o'clock tomorrow morning, so I may not be able to do it this evening, but I'll try and get it done as soon as I can tomorrow.
That would be appreciated. Thank you very much for that. Right, so let's wrap up. What have we been watching? I'm going to be quick on this one. I haven't been watching much, but I have been getting through The Crown. I've just getting to the end of season 2. I think last time we spoke on a podcast, I was still about halfway through season 1. So as you can see, I'm getting about 1 or 2 episodes an evening at the moment and getting through that one. Season 5, I think we're up to. So I've got a little bit more to catch up. But I thought I would hate it, and actually I'm really enjoying it. I'm finding it. I know a lot of it is not true, and there's a lot of fictionalization going on, but it's also based on events that we do have good documentation about and so on. So I'm cutting it some slack. I'm actually enjoying it and getting through the episodes, and I don't find they're dragging in any way. So if you haven't seen it, I think it's worth investing your time. Like I say, it's up to season 5 now, so it's not like it's going to get cancelled anytime soon. And our own mobile phone reviewer, Dave Phelan, is in it as well. He's an actor in it, so catch Dave. Right. I should say David, not Dave. You kill me for calling him Dave. Right, so let's wrap up then. Ed, what have you been watching?
Like you, I have not been watching a lot of television this phase, Phil, but I did take some time out to watch the Netflix documentary on Woodstock 99, which is just, I knew Woodstock 99 was something of a disaster. I didn't realize it was as horrendous as that. It's well worth a moment of your time. Absolutely incredible thing to watch. That is the only piece of new release television that I have watched. I mean, I've momentarily caught bits of the Commonwealth Games, which has been lovely, and I watched bits of the Euros as well, but that was mainly in the pub, so that doesn't count. So no, the Netflix documentary on Woodstock 99, highly recommended. Very, very good watch, if not necessarily an easy watch.
Okay. Ian, you been watching anything?
Besides all of the sport, which has been pretty amazing for a couple of weeks, especially with the women's football team doing amazingly well. But yeah, TV-wise, finally got around to watching Reacher, which was quite enjoyable without being overly taxing. So that was quite good fun. And currently also 3/4 of the way through watching The Sandman on Netflix, which is also...
Yeah, I need to get around to that.
It's really interesting watch. Kind of bounces around a little bit in the middle stages, but you can see where it's trying to kind of feed a lot of narratives together and sort of prep you for what's coming. So got a few episodes of that to go, so I'm looking forward to where that leads.
Okay. Finally, Jules, what are you recommending this week?
Well, I've not watched too much TV either, apart from I've been watching Commonwealth Games bits and bobs there, but trying to catch up with the Marvel Universe, which I don't get much of an opportunity to see because my wife doesn't like action hero thingies, superhero stuff. So watched the first Tom Holland Spider-Man, which was really good fun. Thought I'll watch the next one, and then didn't realize that I should have watched like Infinity War and Endgame and the rest of it, because like oh my God, he's dead. I won't give any spoilers away if you've not seen it, but yeah, kind of, I should watch them in sequence, but that was good. Really enjoyed them.
Okay, excellent. So that's it for this week. Future podcasts coming up live stream wise. You can catch us on the 22nd of August, and then next month we're also around on the 12th. It's basically the 2nd and 4th Mondays of the month. Come and join us live on YouTube for the live broadcast, and you can catch up later in the week with the recorded, the all-in-one, and everything else that we produce. And Andy also puts together podcast shots. If you want to dive into specific areas of the podcasts, we produce them as short videos. They go on to AV Forums Podcasts. That is our new channel. Please go over there and like and subscribe. We're trying to build the subscribers up on that channel so people can find it easy. And like I say, it focuses on different areas of the podcast. So you can either listen to the whole show as you have tonight if you've been around for live, or you're listening back, or you can listen to different snippets. You can listen to the C2 review or other things that are coming up. So yeah, go do that. Go find that channel and subscribe to it. My thanks to Ian, Jules, and Ed. Thanks very much, guys.
Cheers.
Thank you.
And of course, coming up next is the Movies Podcast. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, then you can leave us a like and subscribe to the channel. You can hit the notification bell. It'll tell you every time we upload new video content. There is a lot of video content coming soon. So keep your eyes on the channel. Lots of TV reviews in the pipeline to come up there on video-wise. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. You can bookmark avforums.com for latest reviews, news, and videos. And of course, leave us a 5-star rating on whichever service you use to listen to the podcast. We really do appreciate your feedback. Thank you once again. I'm Phil Hinton. Thank you very much for watching and listening, and please join Kaz and the movies team at 8:30 tonight for the Movies Podcast. Until then, goodbye.